My first time to Amsterdam. So this is the first time I've also given this particular talk, so it should be interesting. The kind of talk that I'm going to be doing today is very design-focused and very high-level, but hopefully you'll be able to take some kind of inspiration out of it. So I've called it Devices, Designs, and Enabling Behaviors, and hopefully you'll see why over the next 50 minutes. Actually, I'll go back. I studied ants at university, so I have a fondness of natural systems and elegance in design, and I try and apply that to my design thinking when I build things. So I'm Antony, co-founder of a company called Ribot, and you can find me by looking out for these red stripy shoes. So Ribot are a 10, 11-person team based in Brighton in the UK, and the reason why we exist is to create showcase experiences, not necessarily with the latest technologies, but instead to innovate with simplicity. And so we describe ourselves in an ideas lab for small screen devices. So on to the actual talk. So the iPhone education. It's been great. It's been great for the industry. I've actually been in the industry for about 8 years now. I feel like a veteran, even though I look quite young and like a hobbit as well. But great for the industry. And what it's actually done is it's educated the mass market. I recall about a year and a half ago, because of the advertising campaigns being done in the States, people were associating the Facebook service with a particular phone, and they were calling it the Facebook phone. They didn't think that any other phone could actually do Facebook. So we're now in a position, thankfully, where we can describe the mobile as, and the mass market can describe the mobile as a penknife rather than a chopstick or pair of chopsticks. It does many different functions other than just calling and texting. So that's great, but that's just really the start of the education process. Some stats from the US. Of the 100% of people that have some type of mobile device, only 68% of those have actually sent a text message. It seems very bizarre. And again, only 38% have used a browser. Even lower, 37% have downloaded an app. So it's still, that's an indication that we've still got some way to go to educate people as to what they can really do. But that's kind of aside. The iPhone revolution didn't happen for many people, actually. Why? Well, two main reasons. As has been previously mentioned, there's a high cost barrier to the iPhone. I like to describe the iPhone as the aspirational device. I like to describe the Android as the can afford to have device, and the other devices, well, I don't know. The other devices. So in the UK, it's really interesting in terms of consumer behaviors in store. So when a consumer is going out to buy a new phone to upgrade, 60% of their decision will be made entirely on the cost of the device. So the other part here, the iPhone is not simple enough. Now, from a design point of view, the iPhone is amazing, and it is probably the most accessible mobile on the market at the moment, but it still isn't simple enough for many different kinds of people. But who am I speaking about? So the first market, the aging population. The media talk a lot about the aging population, and I'll go into some more specifics later on. There's also a market that we tend to forget about, the technophobes. The people who are a bit scared of technology. Even though I'm now 30, I go to my girlfriend's flat, and she's now got a TV, and she's got 3 controllers. And it's like, I kind of switch off when I see it. I get her to change the channel because I'm actually too confused, and that's me. And then again, there's the people on low disposable income. So, on the subject of the aging population, again, these stats are UK specific, but they're quite scary. And so we've got 10.1 million going up to 16.7 million of people. That's the number of people who are going to be aged 65 or older in the UK, and that's the change over the next 25 years. Then, to cater for that, the government has to increase public spending 3 times. And the other interesting behaviour associated with all this is that actually the older are getting younger. So to better describe that, a person who's 60 now is doing very different things to a person who was 60 20 years ago. Right. So, the smartphone. I'm not going to go into how you define a smartphone. I was going to try, but there's one popular statistic that gets shared around the mobile community, and that's that currently only 20% of mobile devices that are being purchased are smartphones, whatever a smartphone may be. So this other 80%, who's using it? What are they really doing? And how do you target and accommodate that market? So one strategy is to acquire another company that can deliver a product on a number of different devices. So Facebook made an acquisition in March this year to acquire a company called Snap2. Now, Snap2 it's a kind of a Java-based system that allows you to support 2,500 different devices with just a simple UI, and it's amazing. And as Robert Scoble is quoted here, the San Francisco cool kids will yawn, but there are billions of people who don't have an iOS or Android device. It's just kind of the simple maths. So, right. The next stage of my little talk. I'm going quite quickly, so that's good. But am I talking too slowly, too fast? Any feedback yet? No? Good? Okay, good. Right, so transitions of interaction. What do I mean by that? Right, we start off 25 years ago where our interactions are generally what I describe as analog. There's kind of knobs and switches that you twist and turn and push and pull in the home. But since then, we've actually been digitizing those kinds of interface, and digitizing quite well. We wouldn't exist if we hadn't successfully digitized what we've done so far. But now, there's a new transition to a new type of interaction, and that's something I like to call physical. So, what is physical? What do I mean by that? The best example. The best first example, really, was the mass market introduction of the touchscreen device. That happened, 4 or 5 years ago now. And there's a number of other different technologies which are helping make our devices more like our real world, which is important in making things as simple as possible for the mass market. So, how do we make things more physical? I've touched on one area so far. The next major battle is that of audio input. Now, we can all speak maybe different languages, but the next battle will be, let's say, iPhone versus Android. Android have already got some lovely capabilities, audio input capabilities. Apple currently don't know what to do. The rumored big feature is that they will support this audio input mechanism. They might have to acquire a company, maybe, for example, Nuance, but that would cost them $6.5 billion. So that's going to be very, very interesting and very accessible to everyone, really. The next area haptic feedback. So by haptic feedback, I mean kind of sensory feedback. I don't have any buttons here, but if the feeling when you press a button on a lift, that feeling that it's gone in and then comes back out. This, at the moment, in mobile is, I would describe as quite crude. It uses a simple kind of vibrate function. There may be different frequencies of vibrate, but what we'll see over the next few years are kind of massive mass market advancements of that particular technology. The technologies I like to mention, so there's one called electro-deforming polymer displays. So you've got a flat surface here, and then as soon as you take it out of your pocket, it changes state. It can feel the electric current, and it changes the state of the membrane. So there's other areas which go down, other areas which go up. So my view, my not too distant view of the future is that we really shouldn't be using our eyes to glance at these devices. We should be using our fingers. We shouldn't need to look at the devices to glance at first. If we find something interesting, oh, I've got an unread message, then I'll glance at it. There was something in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress that was demonstrated this year, and what was presented to me was a new mobile device with a chameleon on it. I don't know if anyone else saw it? No? Oh, one chap there. Really quite interesting. So the mobile device was presented to me, chameleon, and I was given a plastic pen. I was told, okay, move the pen around, and the chameleon's eyes track the pen. Okay, nothing really that new there. But then they asked me to take the pen closer to the phone, not to touch the display, and so I took the pen close to the phone, and closer, and then, whoa, I felt like I had an electric kind of current shock in my hand, but my hand was repelled from the interface without even touching it. So that was, I think, what they call magnetic haptic interfaces. So then, obviously ditch the crude pen, replace the crude pen with a magnetic haptic glove, and then you start to be able to feel things, maybe replace the magnetic haptic glove with magnetic haptic bodysuit, holodeck, and all that. Anyway, really, really quite interesting stuff, and demonstrable now. It might take a few years to actually get to mass market. There was one other example that I'd like to mention in terms of what I'd seen recently, and it was another demo where a guitar interface was presented to me, and it had strings on it, and so I kind of strummed my thumb across the interface, and it actually felt like I was plucking strings. It was just a custom Android device. It's in prototype in the US at the moment, but it really felt like I was playing a guitar. So that's where we are at the moment, and that's what will be coming out in the next few years. Right, so this is all kind of the story bits I like to tell. So, okay, the other really obvious one, it only struck me, really, August last year, where my brother and I had to purchase our mother a birthday present. So we thought, she needs a new phone. Let's get her the iPhone 4. Actually, she needs a new laptop. Okay, what laptop do we? Actually, ditch the laptop. Let's maybe consider a tablet, iPhone 4 or iPad. And we thought, okay, both are the same cost function. Which is going to be the one that we choose? And for some reason, I could have put my hands on my iPad, and then it struck me that the iPad is the size of my two hands, and implicitly, because of that size, it's going to be more usable for her. And so come birthday, she's very happy. She's got the iPad. So the story goes on. 2 weeks later, she phones me up and describes the day to me, her general day. And she starts off checking her email at 6 o'clock in the morning on her iPad. And she's not in a role that requires the checking of email, but she does because she can. She then goes off to school. She works at a local school and comes back in the afternoon. She gets the iPad out, but what does she do on the iPad? Any guesses? Oh, I heard the right answer. Checks email. Angry Birds, someone said over there. She plays Angry Birds. So this comes from two sons who've played immense numbers of games. We've probably had 4,000 games in the house when we were young, but we could never get her to play games. She always got too excited. We'd got her the Wii in the past, but she'd only play it when the boys came home. And so that was great. So I was like, wow, this is really amazing. And she ended that conversation with, oh yeah, and I'm using it so much that I'm draining the battery every night. Oh my God, we've created a monster. But you know, I'm happy about it. That story ends how I'll end it is 2 weeks later. There's the second phone call, and she says to me two things. She describes, just kind of randomly, the iPad as her third hand. I think, wow, thank you, Mum. I'm going to use that in conferences around the world. And then she says to me something that I never thought I would ever hear. I think you can guess. Can you? Come on. She'd completed Angry Birds. Like, what's going on here? But it was great. I mean, aside from Angry Birds, she's now eBaying things. She's doing all these. For me, that was the first personal situation where I could describe that technology as enabling actions. It was an amazing feeling. Sorry. Okay. So, the main topic of what I'm trying to talk about today revolves around this statement here: design with as many people in mind as possible. So I've tried to describe it like that. And that's what you should have at the back of your mind. That's often described as this term, inclusive design. But that means more to me, design with as many people in mind as possible. So inclusive design can also be described as universal design, barrier-free design, transgeneration. There's lots of overlap between all these different terms, but I just wanted to kind of get them up there so that maybe you could kind of Google them in the future and see what the real differences are. But the important bit is that where am I? Designing with as many people in mind as possible. Right. So designing for inclusivity, what you're doing there, you're designing for independence, you're designing for engagement, and you're designing for task-centric behaviors. What I'm speaking about today is actually very, very simple, but it's very interesting that it doesn't actually get employed too often at the moment. It's a kind of up-and-coming area, really. So in terms of the up-and-coming area, I'm going to mention now a few devices that have gone through an inclusive design process. In England, there's the home phone. Essentially, it's a big button phone, high contrast display, big fonts, and just a simple function set. So, interestingly, this is a really interesting stat I discovered just last week. So a 70-year-old compared to a 20-year-old. So in terms of readability, the 70-year-old needs the font size to be double that of the 20-year-old. I just thought that, I don't know, I knew that they needed bigger fonts, but wow, I think that's really good to kind of keep in the back of your mind. Then onto the area of food packaging. So when you start to explore how people interact with products, you start to understand the kind of dexterity impairments, that you start to understand that there's certain types of ways that you hold a device that are actually painful for some people. People suffering from some arthritis or maybe multiple sclerosis actually they describe the pinch as a pain point. They prefer the kind of the cupping of the phone. So in general, there's pushing, there's pinching, and then there's power gripping. And this handle on the milk carton is a great example of how the design of this carton has developed over years to incorporate a more inclusive method of handling the device. So another really interesting stat associated to that is that a 70-year-old has the same strength as a 10-year-old. It's like, wow. Well, and this is generally speaking, there might be the old kind of Hulk Hogans who maybe have the strength of a little bit more than a 10-year-old. But anyway, really interesting. Then, for me, the creme de la creme of inclusively designed products is the cordless kettle. So the story behind the cordless kettle is that it was initially designed to try and alleviate health and safety concerns in the kitchen for elderly people. And now it's become a design standard for everyone. That's the most amazing inclusively designed product in my mind. And for me, that's what I aspire to. Then there was the last one I'll show you, the shower controller thing. I didn't know how to call it. But apparently this is inclusively designed, but I actually don't. I get confused by this thing. So there's still a lot of work to do with that. But what they've used there, again, color, larger fonts, a kind of simple status mechanism. So I think we have to ask ourselves, actually, be it the real physical products or these digital products that we're focusing on, why are we creating them? And there's a number of reasons. It's time-saving, it's money-saving, it's enabling other actions, and it's actually feeding our habits as well. So again, when we tackle projects, slightly associated with this, we ask a question to ourselves at the start, and it's, what emotion do we want to evoke on the consumer? So we worked on the Tesco Recipes iPad application last year, and the emotion that we wanted to evoke was we wanted to make the customers salivate. And thankfully, with that product, we were combining the ability to buy your groceries with some lovely, inspiring food photography from another Tesco source. So it's nice to kind of refer back to that emotional question throughout the product design process to make sure that you're actually doing what you initially set out to do. So this is kind of an old slide, kind of rehashed really, but really, really important, and really important on when it comes to mobile. Reuse learnt behaviours. What do I mean by that? The example I often give is when we designed the Tesco, the shopping experience, we designed it for Nokia devices, we designed it for iPhone, we might be designing it for Android. Anyway, we designed it for Windows Phone 7. Now, all of them were very, very similar apart from Windows Phone 7, which had very different behaviors, very different way of navigating through the interface. And you just need to ensure that you're making the most out of what the customer is used to. So present them with interfaces that they're used to. I can give an Android device to a random stranger, and within 5-10 seconds, I can tell generally if they're an iPhone user or not. iPhone users will perform certain gestures on the display. It's really quite interesting. Right. Also, reuse real-world actions. Not those, actually. We don't want to kind of use the iPhone or the Android to chop things yet. But reuse real-world actions. Scanning, for example. It might, again, sound obvious, but we integrated scanning, the scanning function, so the red laser APIs, into the second iteration of the Tesco shopping app. And it had been successful up until that point, but as soon as kind of the scanning feature got integrated, and there was a TV advert associated with it as well. But as soon as that got out, people just they immediately understood what it was about. So, and I think the other bit was the audio feedback. The fact that when you scan a product, you got a little beep. And I've got a shop in my pocket now. And so you'd find customers scanning one product in their food cupboard, and they get really excited. They start scanning lots of other things, and they go crazy in their homes. Some people could call it a gimmick, but it was really very simple for the mass market to understand. Right. One step. One step is best. So I don't know if you know what we were going through in terms of voting last week in the UK, but the alternative vote. So we were potentially pitching to have 2 votes, but it didn't go ahead. Apparently because not enough people understood it, the fact that you've got 2 votes instead of 1, too confusing for people, basically. Anyway, themes aside, it really helps just focus on singular task functions. So there's a reason why we have buttons and interfaces that perform a specific task. So search, purchase, login, check-in, scan. And again, when you start to think about different audiences, when you start to age, your memory starts to go. One other thing that we do when we're designing interfaces, sometimes you design along a flow, and you think, okay, the flow is the context here. But what you should also do is take away all that other context and try and see if you can understand that screen. Does it make sense? And if it does make sense, great. If it doesn't make sense, you need to add something in there because just to act as a reminder. So it sounds kind of all straightforward and easy, but the user really kind of needs to come first, and there's actually many issues out there. So I like the water bucket analogy that I heard of first sometime last year. So we've got the young water bucket. It holds the water very well, does its job. Now, as the bucket gets older, it gets rusty, and the common conception is that the rusty bucket has a hole. So let's say that hole is arthritis. That's actually not a very realistic situation. The more realistic situation is that the water bucket actually has multiple holes in a manner of different places. So one person might have arthritis, they might have a slight case of dementia, and other things, or just kind of some visual impairment, which is quite common. So that's also very important to keep at the back of your mind, that designing inclusively is actually quite hard, but it does pay off. You can't cater for everyone, but if you do come up with an inclusively designed product, then it should be better. Right. Woo! Right. So there's a chap called who I recently discovered called Richard Seymour. He's actually a very well-known product designer in London, and I'm stealing 2 of his questions here. So his first question was, why does a bra fasten at the back? And he's like, yeah. I know some bras now, well, I don't know, but anyway, yeah, I do. Oh, God. Some bras apparently fasten at the front as well, but it just makes, this isn't a user-centered design. It doesn't make any sense, as well as this. Why keep anti-arthritis pills in a child-safe container? Just doesn't make any sense. Right, so there's many problems out there that still need to be tackled, and it's, like I said earlier, it's only the start of thinking inclusively. So one other important area to mention is that inclusive doesn't imply uninspiring. It should be actually quite the opposite. inclusive product, for me, like the cordless kettle, is an aspirational, simple, I don't know, lovely piece of design. I aspire to that in the things that I create on mobile. So, yeah, simple, inspiring, aspirational products. So, the next little section is more of a case study. So, we've been doing some more, so that was general stuff. And now I want to feature on stuff we've actually been working on in the last year and a half, 2 years, to kind of share with you guys. So last year, I mentioned Tesco, but we see it as enabling a mass market, small screen shopping experience. So there you go. There's 2 screens from the iPhone version. Now, what I didn't go into when I was talking about the scanning was the behaviors. So we generally designed for the in the kitchen, in the home behavior of, okay, milk carton's run out, now I'll scan it before I put it in the bin. And that is the common behavior. But there are 3 other behaviors. I'm going to forget one, aren't I? There are 3 other behaviors that have come out of integrating this particular feature into the app. Now, there's one where customers are going into the supermarket and they're they're going into competitor stores and they're looking at the price and then they're scanning the item with their app. If it's cheaper on the app, they add it in the app. If it's cheaper in store, they add it to their kind of physical basket. I thought, oh, quite interesting, savvy consumers. I think I've forgotten the second behavior, annoyingly, but it's the other behavior that, for me, is the most inspiring, that I could never have foreseen. So there's another smaller section of consumers who are going into the physical store, the physical Tesco store, and they're not picking up a basket, they're not picking up taking a trolley, but they're walking around nearly as normal as usual. And they're scanning items. They're not performing a transaction there and then, generally. The transaction is performed maybe when they get home or maybe later in the week. But none of that is actually that interesting. Where it gets interesting is where we understand the type of goods that they're buying and the demographic of the person that's buying those goods. So the type of goods, large, heavy items, and the demographic, the elderly, generally the elderly audience, they're getting the large, heavy items delivered to their door. They don't want to carry them. They can't carry them in most cases. And for me, it's like, oh, that's such an amazing behavior, and I couldn't have foreseen it, but it's great that it's happened. Very inspiring. So you never know quite how a feature will actually really be used in the real world. So that was last year. This year, what we're trying to do is enabling the kind of an iPhone-like experience for the rest of us on Android. So the story with that, 16 months ago, we were awarded a small UK government grant to look into how we can improve touchscreen phones for dexterity-impaired people. And the average age of our studio is 28, 29, so we're all, none of us suffer from these things, thankfully, or know anyone that suffers from the dexterity-impaired things. So I thought, okay, we're all about challenges here. Let's try and make the most out of our naivety and challenge ourselves to see what we could come up with. So we ran, what's the next bit? So we conducted some research, ran some workshops, and it was amazing. It was very eye-opening, and after we'd completed the feasibility project, which is only a 2-3 month project, it was later in the year, so August last year again, that I was describing that project as the most emotional project that I've ever worked on. And it was the 3rd time that I said it, that I thought, oh gosh, we can't, it was just stored in a cupboard. So in the end, we decided, okay, let's put some resource into this. Let's invest in designing this thing from scratch, building it from scratch, and seeing where it could go. But first of all, throughout the research, we discovered that whoever you are, you want three things. You want to be as independent as possible. You want to have as simple experience as possible, or interface, and you want to be connected in as many ways as possible. It was really amazing. So, how do you tackle that? Created a 3-button phone to enable people to call, text, take photos, browse photos, text, play music. That was it. I mean, sounds really simple, and it kind of is simple. So this is the more amusing bit. So what's it called and what does it look like? Some of you may know because you may have gone to our website already. We call it Freedom. So yeah, kind of very, very simple. So 3 buttons. You've got, if you look at, well, generally 3 buttons. We actually tried 3 buttons on the dialer, but it was just too complex. So there are cases where you just need to make things more complex to make it more simple. A little bit. But the general structure is bottom right-hand button is kind of a neutral. It's the next button. Then the main area up top is one big button, which is the positive, and then the button bottom left is the negative. Yeah, it's a 3-button phone. We're now about to launch the alpha, and we're looking for feedback. So, more feedback, the better. It's on freedomphone.com. Feels like a bit of a little pitch, but hopefully, why I've wanted to mention it is to hopefully inspire people into how simplicity is actually is really required, especially in the mobile market. What we're trying to do now is hopefully, and the reason why I kind of present this, is to hopefully start a new trend in terms of simple phones and simple interfaces for phones, simple apps. And so, where the cordless kettle went and became a design standard, hopefully a 3-button or similar will become a standard on mobile. That was me. That was 37 minutes. At Ribot on Twitter. Any questions? Thank you. Yeah, that was very quick, actually, wasn't it? Can't see any questions. Oh, question down here.
Hi, you talked a lot about how you were looking at device design for the elderly. Have you looked at the other extreme and been exploring how kids interact with these devices as well?
So the question was if we've looked at the younger market. Haven't looked at the younger market. Simple question, simple answer, but very interested by it. I've overseen some youngsters, less than the age of 5, use, let's say, the iPad, and it's amazing in the sense of they associate different things with actions. So they'll remember the nose of a pig. They'll remember to press the nose of the pig, and it doesn't look like a button, but they'll remember it better than I would. So anyway, a button doesn't need to be a button. It just needs to be associated with something that maybe is more physical for them. So yeah, who's going to go and do some more inclusive design stuff? Or who's interested in inclusive design? Oh, we got some. Cool. Okay. Good. Oh, no, not a question. No. Okay.
Okay, so thank you for an inspiring talk, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I wonder how you at Ribot, was it, go about when you, because I assume that you actually test this also on real old people, or
yeah,
or the demographies you're interested in.
Fake old people, no.
And so I was just wondering how you go about to test this, and maybe what you do with the feedback that you get back.
So I'll relate to the stage that we're at. So we'd conducted some workshops in the early stages, so workshops with people that had suffered from kind of a whole range of things, and that's why I mentioned the water bucket analogy. You know, we had someone who'd suffered from multiple sclerosis from some very early years, someone who'd actually been in a car accident, so had been fully able-bodied until the age of 26, and then kind of lost the use of his legs and has very minimal use of his hands. One thing I didn't mention that we also uncovered during the workshops was that for a general way of looking at dexterity impairedness is that they often describe as wearing boxing gloves, and you can't take the boxing gloves ever off, and that's the level of resolution or accuracy that you've got with your hands. For us, it's about conducting user tests regularly. You don't actually have to conduct them with that many. We've got the next round of testing with an elderly care home where we're just interviewing 2 or 3 people. It's just that little bit of feedback. Does it actually make sense? The people that have signed up for Freedom Phone, actually, you can tell in the description they're all kind of techie people. It's like, okay, that's good. I mean, I want a simple phone, but we're also trying to get into to see if it's actually valuable to people who suffer from other things. So it's just that it's small iterations. You don't have to invest too much, and it's just about trying to meet certain people, forming relationships with charities and other organizations who can put you in touch with people that are going to suffer a range of things. This kind of project has been very emotional throughout. That we got burgled about 2.5 months ago, so we were welcomed on Friday morning by a hole in the wall, and I thought, oh, great, I hadn't been burgled before, so I was quite excited actually. But then by the afternoon it kind of settled in, and people from around the building were coming in just to see the hole in the wall that the thieves had made, and just purely by chance, this other chap popped his head in. I said, oh, what are you doing? I'm here to look at your hole. I said, oh, well. And then we had a little chat and exchanged business cards. And 3 weeks later, he then sent me an email and said, very inspired by your 3-button phone, can we have a chat? I've got a business proposition. And so then we had the little meeting, and he says he's got kind of a few tens of thousands of worth of pounds to invest in essentially an app on top of Freedom that does a very specific task. And I asked, well, what's the driving point here? So he takes me back to the 18th of September, where his son, who flew to Haiti to see his girlfriend, who was doing aid work over there, is on holiday. And on the last day of holiday, there's a car crash in front of them, and then the car crash kind of rolls into them, kills the girlfriend, and his son ends up with severe head injuries. And now he's in a position where his son is, needs a constant carer, but he kind of saw something like Freedom as enabling the independence, and essentially it's just kind of something to remind him to do things, but also as a kind of hopefully kind of a revenue generator for him as well, because obviously it's an investment for him. But it's those kinds of experiences that we're discovering ourselves in. So, yeah. Cool. So I went from. Oh.
Could you talk a little bit more about the ergonomics of that Freedom phone? Which is the hardware button, which is the screen stuff? So
Okay, sorry, I've got my shoes. I have to.
Thank you.
So the thing that what I didn't mention earlier, there was the one barrier to the smartphone market is the cost, and then it's simplicity. So what we've done here is it isn't a specific Android device, it's any Android device. So it works on the Nexus S, the 400, 500 pound phones, but also works on the 20 pound pay-as-you-go Android that you can get in Tesco Extra. So in terms of ergonomics, it's just a normal Android phone. In the future, I want to make use of haptic feedback, so you can actually feel And this is actually not too distant. So you can feel where the buttons are, because it's just that next step towards becoming a more physical device, and that means a much more usable device. Yeah.
I've got a question as well.
Oh.
Why did you go for the grungy look on the buttons? Is that
Grungy?
Yeah, the grungy look, the making the real, recreating it on digital.
That's actually so. Generally, the older market actually don't like this look. That's the feedback that we've got of showcasing it at kind of health events and things like that. So one thing we're doing behind the scenes is allowing kind of different skins. But again, I guess the design, that UI, the specific UI design came about from trying to actually go with something more physical. So little bits of paper. So it was just an experiment, really. We just stuck with it. It's that kind of focus on trying to get something out as quickly as possible, so then we can get some feedback. Is it of value to people? And then kind of iterate. Oh, they want this. They don't like that, or what have you. So that's the reason behind the current look and feel. Yeah, it could be a lot simpler. Cool.
When you go for inclusive design, don't you risk that you will eventually design something that is usable for everyone, but not great for anyone? Or do you see the freedom phone?
That's the reason why I mentioned the cordless kettle. That's what I aspire to. That's usable by everyone and liked by everyone. Everyone just sees it as much more useful to them compared to the previous designs, and safer and things like that. So.
But you could also argue that maybe you would have to create a usable application for disabled or slightly disabled users, and then maybe another application of completely different for power users or nerds or whatever.
I think tackling the inclusive area, it's a way of getting inspiration as to what the larger audience really want, and something like Freedom could go off into many different directions. We're being taken into the dementia market, we're being taken to the kind of visual impairment market, being taken to, actually what I didn't say, is the mass market. On conducting the workshops, people don't want something that stigmatizes them. They don't want as they called it, the disabled phone. So we purposely tried to design something with the mass market in mind that was kind of an aspirational product for them, but was also usable by them. There aren't many examples of nicely designed products on the market, but I think that's a major gap in the market. So.
Do you use one?
I've got one in my bag over here. But
Is it your primary phone? I mean, will you eventually use the Freedom phone?
Yes. Yeah. It would be silly to talk about it and not use it. So.
Okay. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Oh.
We talk a lot about simplifying the user experience for a greater, pleasure of using the device and greater functionality. What do you think about the place of a power user mode within that type of thinking? Like, I have an iPod Touch, and some of the design decisions that have been made sometimes madden me, they make me crazy. And some level of tweaking or maybe more advanced features, how do we at the same time reach a broader audience but also target specific user groups with things that may be in conflict with one another?
Well, again, I'll give this as an example. There's a settings area. Now, what we uncovered, again, in our workshops is that people suffering from dexterity impairments, generally they have kind of a stabbing action on a device, and gestures are just basically a no-go zone. So, but if you look at the mass market, the mass market is now in a process of education as to, oh, I like gestures. This is how I move around my gallery and things like that. So it's just that simple kind of switch between gesture mode on or off. I think that's my simple answer, and then maybe we'll have another conversation about more complex interfaces.
One of the things here to me that's obvious for the pictures is that you get bigger buttons, so you privilege the gestures of, like you said, the stabbing movements, but at the same time, the picture is now half of the screen of what it could be because it doesn't take up. So visually, you've reduced the usability of the picture and privileged the usability of gesture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the areas where I keep on seeing conflicts and issues that bring, more questions about design like this.
Yeah. It's a balancing act.
Sure.
But work in progress, and I hope it's that kind of, now that RIM have bought TAT. Hopefully something from you guys will come out in this area as well.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Cool. Cool.
There is a question in the back. Last question, I guess.
Hi. So it's great, the simplicity of the touchscreen and everything, but for the device itself, have you addressed the problem of plugging the phone charger in and turning the device on and off for the impaired users?
Is the question?
Do you think about it, and are there any solutions for that?
So at the moment, I guess my honest answer to that is that we're best at designing interfaces. That's what our skill set is. We'd love to be industrial designers as well, hardware designers, but we're only 11 people at the moment, and we're kind of funding this ourselves at the moment. So, but the way to tackle that, let's say in the future, is to potentially partner up with people that are skilled in those areas. But we consider all those things, but they're in a way not options for us, because the first route to market for us is just as an app on any Android device. The ideal future would be a partnership with a device manufacturer or a network operator, and so we can actually have the Freedom phone where we have control over things like that. But that's some way away. Those kinds of deals. Well, I'm just not used to those kinds of deals, and it requires lots of money. And I have to kind of run a service company as well. So didn't really answer your question, but maybe we can talk later as well. Cool.
Thank you very, very much for an inspiring talk.